We have just explored a bunch of the demographics of the United States today, and now we want to kind of take a look and see what changes are taking place, like what patterns we can notice in the data and the way that it's changed over the last few years. So we're going to take a look at some demographic trends, and this very scary photo here is showing us a bunch of very excited old people. They got to be excited because they are one of our fastest growing groups in the United States. So, if the number of old people is growing, that tells us that old people will continue to have a tremendous amount of political power. All right, first up, we'll just take a look quickly at the trends that we see in race. So, as you read, like America is becoming more racially and ethnic diverse. That's because we have a lot of income. I mean, a lot of incoming immigrants from all different parts of the world. We have our like racial and ethnic minorities in the United States are having like faster growth rates than white people, and so, what we predict is that by about 2050 or a little after that, the United States will not have a racial majority. It will, like, white people will be the most people in the United States, but they won't make up 51%. So, we've had a ton of immigrants over the last 50 years. We've had about 60 million immigrants. And today, almost 15% of the country was born outside of the United States. That's a huge number. That's more than, 1 out of 10 people. So if we go back to 1965, only 5% of the country had been born outside of the United States. And so this is a huge change to the population of the United States. And the maps over here show us there's a 2014 map that is the only one we can prove, but that's showing us what percentage of minority voters make up those states. So you see that like those states in the South and the Southwest, they have minority voters being a really noticeable, like a big chunk of that voting pool for the whole state. And as we project these trends into the future by 2040 and especially by 2060, minority voters will make up the majority of voters in a great number of states. And especially, you look at what states it is. It's California, Texas, New York, Florida, Georgia, Illinois. These are big states with big numbers of electoral votes. When we see the term minority majority, we're talking about a country where the smaller racial groups make up the 51% of the population. So, like, white people may still be the largest group in 2050, but if we count other voters together, those other voters could make up 51% of the voters. And so, here's just some statistics, just a different way to look at that, but we'll see that white people as a percentage of the population will go from well over half to about 45% by the year 2050. And so that will make them a less powerful voting bloc. While at the same time, we see that Hispanics will double as a percentage of voters. That will make them a much more powerful voting bloc. Asians will be a much more powerful voting bloc. And we see that African Americans, that number stays the same. That does not mean that African Americans are not going to grow as a population, but basically we could use them as the anchor on this chart. We could take African American growth rate, and we know that white people will grow slower than that. Hispanic people will grow a lot faster than that. And then Asian and other populations will grow a little bit faster than that. But this is just giving us a look into the future at what the racial balance of the United States will be. Regionally, something you guys read about is that more and more Americans are moving away from the Midwest, and they are moving away from the Northeast even, and they are moving to what's called the Sun Belt, places in the Southeast, places in the Southwest, like where the climate is warmer. And so Americans are moving away from the Northeast and the Midwest. We can see on this map here. Michigan and West Virginia from 2007 to 2017, they actually like their population shrank. All the other countries grew, but the countries that grew very, very slowly are those countries in the Midwest: Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania. Also very slowly in Indiana, Kentucky, Wisconsin, all that. The places that are growing quickly tend to be out in the Southwest or the very Southeast in Georgia and Florida. So Texas and Utah would be the states where the populations are growing the fastest. So this has huge implications for elections because this will translate into voting power for president. And this will translate into voting power in Congress, right? This will turn into seats in Congress and it will turn into electoral votes. All right, we touched on this just a little bit earlier. In religion, we also see some changes taking place. Christians are declining as a percentage of the population. Doesn't mean that they're not growing, but they're growing much slower than the other groups. So Christians in 2003 made up 83% of the population, and in 2017 they were down to just 72% of the population. So as the non-religious group grows, that will make Christians a smaller and smaller percentage of the population in the country. So we have smaller religions that are growing faster, and we have non-religious groups growing faster than Christianity. All right, we're going to explore this a lot when we get into economic policies and social welfare policies and stuff like that. But it is important for us to understand that that in income, the trends are that the highest percentiles of income earners, the richest Americans, are earning more and more and more money. Those people on the low end are continuing to earn the same amount of money. And so the gap between the upper income groups and the lower income groups is growing very quickly. The group in the middle class, which had been the biggest block of voters, it had been the biggest share of the United States. That group is shrinking. So it is now, this is a 2015 chart, but it's now down to just 50% of the population pool. So it had made up more than, a healthy majority of the population pool, and now the middle class is continuing to shrink. And finally, our trend in age. Here we see a little population pyramid from the 70s, and we see one from 2012, and we can see that that group of baby boomers, they have reached retirement age. And so that has caused a drastic change in our population pyramid here. This is what is referred to as the graying of America. So we have a lot of things going on at the same time. We have baby boomers that have reached retirement age. That was already a huge chunk of the population, and now they've just reached old age. But also, technology and medical advances are allowing people to live much, much longer. So that we've got more and more old people, and Americans their birth rates are decreasing. People are having less children than they had in the past, and so all this is leading us to a situation where we have like a very large aging population, and we might not have enough younger labor force population to support it. All right, if President Trump is struggling with his umbrella here, we know it's time to take a look at some bigly ideas. So we're just going to run through just a quick recap of the important stuff we need to remember. All right, here's what I want you guys to know. None of the stats are important today. It is not important for you to remember any of the numbers. We need to know the basic information here. So if I needed to talk about the racial breakdown of the United States, it's important for me to know that white people make up a majority of the population, and the second biggest group is Hispanic, and the third biggest group is African American, and that's it. You're never going to be asked a specific detail as small as that. We'd want to know things in religion, like the fastest growing group is the non-religious, but Christians still make up a majority of the population and things like that. So we're really just very basically describing the breakdown of the population today and the trends that we saw over time. All right, that's it for demographics. So we've spent today taking a good look at who makes up the public in the United States, and now we'll start to shift over to what roles the public play in politics and in government.